Hello everybody and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's session on new starters in Sage 50 Payroll. My name's Alice, I'm going to be your host and presenter for the session, and I'm also joined by my colleague Duncan, who's on hand ready to answer your questions throughout as well. And a little look at what we'll be covering in the session today too. So we will begin with talking about the information that you need in order to add new starters in Sage 50 Payroll. Before we take a bit of a deeper look at the employee wizard and the quick employee options. We'll then demonstrate how to submit your starter details to HMRC in the full payment submission before a section on some common scenarios with new starters, such as when the employee doesn't have a P45. And then last but not least, we will have a short quiz at the end of the webinar to test your new knowledge. Just a little bit of fun to kind of end things today, so stay tuned for that. But without further ado, let's start with telling you about the information that you need in order to add a new starter. For this, there are three main categories. You've got personal details, payment details, and starter form. Personal details, this is going to be their full name, and it's got to be their full name as it shows on ID or any official documents. Can't be anything like nicknames or shortened down versions of the name. You'll also need the employee's address. This must be 2 lines and a postcode at least. You'll need their date of birth, their gender, and national insurance number if that's available. You also need payment details so you know how to pay the employee. This also includes which pay elements you need to assign them in payroll, their rates of pay. So is that going to be a fixed salary per month, for example, or will they get paid hourly and have things like overtime? You also need to know how many hours they work. So what are their contracted hours, as this information will be submitted in your full payment submission. And then lastly, you do need a starter form from your employee. This is probably most commonly the P45 that they've got from their previous employer. But if they don't have one of these, they will need a starter checklist. And the starter checklist is what's replaced the old P46 form. Some less common examples of a starter form is the P46 pen form, which is to do with non-RTI employers notifying HMRC that an employer is paying an occupational pension to a former employee. Or you've also got the P46 expat form, which is for employees seconded to work in the UK. But in today's examples, we will stick with those more common starter forms, the P45 and starter checklist. So that's the information that you'll need. And here I've just got a couple of screenshots of those starter forms. So I've got the P45 on the left and the starter checklist there on the right. With the P45, there are actually 3 parts to this. You will need part 2 to set up the employee's record in payroll, but you will also need to take part 3 from the employee. Then part 1, this is the employee's copy. So if they do give you this by mistake, you can just give that back to them. Starter checklist as well. So this is for when an employee doesn't have a P45. It is available to download from the gov.uk website, which we've just linked on this slide here. I would always recommend having spare copies of this form anyway. It's a great form for capturing information about the employee, and it does include some things which aren't on the P45, such as student loan or postgraduate loan information. But once you've got that information that you need from the employee, you will be all ready to set up your employee's record, which is what I will be showing you in the demonstration. And there are 2 main ways to set up the employee's record in Sage 50 Payroll. That's going to be either via the employee wizard or the quick employee option. The employee wizard, this kind of walks you through each step of setting up the record. And in my opinion, it is a bit of an easier way to see the information that you're entering, as it's broken down kind of page by page. This option also allows a little bit more detail, but just bear that in mind. It might take you a little bit longer to input the information for the record. You've also got the quick employee option, and this opens up the page that you can see in the screenshot there. So it is 1 page, and you kind of work through and input that information. As the name suggests, it is the quicker option as well, quick employee, and that is the one that I'll be kind of demonstrating today. But with both of these options, the required information that you're going to need to enter is marked with an asterisk symbol. So this means that those fields are mandatory. You do need to input information into them in order to create the employee record. And another way that you can enter a new starter, which I do want to mention, is by importing them from Sage HR. So when you've sent new starter information across from Sage HR, you can import this information into Payroll, and that's going to automatically create the new employee record and just saves you having to input the employee's information again. It also makes sure that they're ready to go on Sage HR just ahead of any online pay slips and things being uploaded for them. And you can do this by using the Import Employee Data option in Payroll, and that's going to be found at the top of your payroll tasks and also in the online services section too. This option, it kind of pulls through any new information there just to kind of see if there is any changes for your employees. You'll then be able to select the information that you want to import. So in this case, it would be the new starter, and that would pull that through into Payroll and create that employee record for you. Now, I won't have time to demonstrate this way today, but for those of you who are using Sage HR, definitely a feature I would advise using. And you can see more about this option as well in our online payslips webinar recordings. We have recently run some sessions on the online payslips option on Sage HR, so definitely have a watch of that if you are interested. But for now, let's bring down the slides and we will go to the demo. So before we do go into Payroll and set up the new record for my new starter, I would like to show you a bit of a closer look at an example of a P45 and the starter checklist too. So this is just the same example from the slides, P45 Part 2. We've got the employee's national insurance number here, their name. We've got the date that they left the previous employment to. Now this date is really important here, so you do need to make sure that this leave date is in the current tax year. This one's not, but it needs to be the 2024-25 tax year. If it's not, you will need to do things slightly differently, but I will come back to that later in the webinar. Box number 5 here, you've then got this, which is indicating whether student loan deductions should continue for the employee. All you would need to do is kind of tick this box, but it doesn't really provide any further details other than this. So this is where the starter checklist would be helpful. Got tax code at leaving date too, and if the code is cumulative, you will also have the total pay to date and total tax to date. And again, that's for the current tax year. So this information will be entered into the new employee's record, meaning the employee's tax can be calculated correctly on that cumulative basis. And that's part 2 of the P45. Just a reminder, you will also be given part 3 of the P45. Now this used to have a bit more of a purpose, I suppose, but not so much since RTI or real-time information came in. So you can just keep hold of part 3 of the P45, and that information is actually automatically included in the FPS submission to HMRC. And then just a closer look at the starter checklist too. So this is just on the gov.uk website. And this is what's replaced the P46. And this is the article that I've linked on the handout too. But the starter checklist, it can be done online. If we scroll down, you can click Start Now. That's just going to kind of work through some questions there. Or more conveniently, it can also be downloaded as a PDF. So we'll take a look at this now. Now, just remember this is primarily for employees without a P45, but I would still recommend just getting your employee to fill this in anyway, as it's a great way of capturing not only the personal details here on page 1, but also they will answer a series of questions about their circumstances on page 2. And the answers from this will result in them being able to choose the relevant starter statement, which is going to be either statement A, statement B, or statement C. These statements are relating to the circumstances around jobs and also whether the employee is in receipt of a state, workplace, or private pension. And then page 3 too, this is where they would input information about the student loan, including the plan type, and a couple of other questions for them to answer if they are repaying a student loan. So from this form here, from the starter checklist, you will have everything you need in order to set up the employee's record. And speaking of, let's go to payroll and we'll get that set up. So I'm logged into payroll now. I've got my monthly company here. Last updated in October. My next pay date's due to be November. So let's go ahead and add this new employee then. Remember, there are two ways to do this. That's going to be either via the employee wizard or the quick employee option. And I can find both of these in the employee tasks, just at the top here. So we'll click on employee wizard first. This is the one that's going to allow you to enter the information step by step, well, page by page, I suppose. You'll click next, kind of fill in the information and keep clicking next until you finish the wizard. You'll click finish and that will create the employee record for you. So as I said, it is a nice way of kind of breaking it down, a little bit less kind of overwhelming to input the information in it this way, I think. I'll cancel out that for now. And the quick employee option too. So this is going to bring up the screen that I'd screenshotted for the slides, but everything is in one place, just everything's on one page for you to enter. And just a reminder, the required information that you're going to need to enter is marked with an asterisk symbol here. So if you do want to create the employee record, at a minimum, this is the information that needs to be entered. Another option you've got, and is actually really helpful if you're hiring someone who's working in the same department or has the same settings as an existing employee, is that you can copy over some of the settings from an existing employee to that new employee record. It's also a great option if you're rehiring someone who's previously left the company and just saves you inputting all of that information that you already have before. And just to show you what I mean, I'm going to highlight the employee I'd like to base the new record off. And let's go and click on Employee Wizard. You'll see I now have more options on this first page. So I can record the details of the new starter using the starter form. That's the same option I had before. I can also create an employee record based on an existing employee. And it does let me know that that's going to be employee 3, as that's the person I've got highlighted. And last option, I can re-employ an employee 2. So this is if, for example, employee number 3 had left, they were a leaver, but then they'd rejoined my employment. So it would recreate their record for this new employment, and it would copy over their personal details too. So it just saves you a little bit of time. And still with employee number 3 highlighted, we'll now click on the quick employee option. And you'll see now I get this message asking, do you want to base your new employee on an existing record and copy over information? If I click no, obviously it wouldn't do that, but let's click yes, see what it pulls through for us. So it's pulled through the pay elements that employee had, the department, and also it's the same payment frequency too, so I've got them down as monthly. So it brings in a couple of things there for you. And from here, it would just be a case of kind of filling in the rest of the information really. So adding the basic details for the employee. So I'm just going to add the name. Not very creative with these. Their address. I'll just pop in a postcode for them. And also their email address too. There we go. And if you click tab on your keyboard, once you've entered the email address, you do get the option to enable the online services for them. So if you use the online payslips and you already upload these for your employees, you are just able to tick this box. And that means that this person will be able to get their profile created. They will get in a kind of email next time the payslips are uploaded. And this email address that you've entered here, this will become the employee's login to the online services. So before, when I mentioned you can import new starters into Payroll, it does go the other way too. So you can kind of feed information back to Sage HR, and that'll be uploaded the next time that the pay slips are. As I said, if you're not sure what the online pay slips are, we have done some recent sessions on this topic. So feel free to watch the recording of this at sage.co.uk/webinars. It is a free option to set up for Sage 50 Payroll, the online pay slips feature. It's great, it's quick, and it's just a secure way to give your employees their pay slips. So if it's free, you may as well make the most of it. But as I mentioned, the information in here marked with an asterisk is mandatory. So I'll continue and enter a date of birth for the employee, and also whether I've conducted a right to work check. So I'll select yes for this. And if I do want to enter any details of this right to work check, click this details button. And let's say I'd used a UK passport for this. I'd select that from the drop down, enter the expiry date and the passport number too, and this information will be recorded in the employee's record. And moving on, I will enter the employee's start date, which is actually the 28th of October. And I can enter the employee's bank details too if I wish. Now, this isn't mandatory information in here. You can actually leave this blank for now, which I will. And anything that you need to add at a later date, you can do so in the employee's record. So I'll leave that blank for now. Then top right, we'll move over to here. And this is where you'll enter that all-important starter form information. So at the top, I've currently got P45 selected. And on the P45, you will get most of this information, so you can input it here, including the date that they've left the previous employment, total pay, total tax to date, and the tax code at leaving date too. But as I kind of touched on before, one of the things that it won't include is the starting declaration. So that's the statement A, B, or C. This is why it's a really good idea to get them to fill in that starter checklist. That way they will answer those questions about previous employment and jobs, and they'll be able to choose the relevant statement for them, which you can then input in here. Now, this particular employee, they don't have a P45. So instead, I'm going to change this in the drop down to P46, which is what the starter checklist was previously known as. And with that selected in the drop down, you'll see it's got rid of that kind of P45 information there. And all I need to do is choose the statement which applies to them, which in my case is statement B. And that is also going to automatically assign the relevant tax code to them. And they're currently 1257L on a week 1 month 1 basis. I'll then go ahead and enter the national insurance number for the employee. And if you don't know what this is, don't make it up. You do have a tick box there, but just saying that it's not known. So just make sure you either enter it in here or select that you don't know what the NI number is. Then next it'll just be national insurance category, which for this employee is just standard rate contributions, category A. Now, according to this employee starter checklist, they aren't repaying a student loan or postgraduate loan, so I'm going to leave these two as no. And then moving on to these next drop downs, we can see it's automatically entered the department and copied that across from the old record. So I can leave that as department 2. And there's also an option to add the pension scheme in here. Now, quick note about this, if you are using the pensions module in Payroll, so the pension assessment and things like that, you must let the pensions module assign the pension scheme. So you would leave this as no pension scheme set. You don't need to do this manually. You'll instead let the pension assessment assess the employee and assign a scheme. And that's just to ensure that the correct information is generated for your pension provider. Now, if you don't use the pensions module, you'll just simply select the pension scheme from the drop-down menu to assign it to the employee. Just underneath here as well, again, not mandatory information, but you can add a job title if you wish, just a bit of extra information for the record. And something else which isn't mandatory, but I am going to actually add in for this employee, is their gross salary. So I'll pop that in, £25,000 per year. And since my employee is monthly, which we've specified over here, the payroll will automatically convert this into a monthly salary for this employee and enter payments. We already have pay elements assigned here too, which have been copied across from that existing record that we'd highlighted. But for any others that you would like to add, again, it's just a case of selecting them from the drop-down. Let's say we wanted to add the basic pay element to them. And same with deductions as well, just select them from there. Now that is all I'm going to enter for now. We have got enough information in here for payroll to create the record. So I'm going to click on Save and Clear in the bottom left corner. That's going to save this, and it's also going to clear down the form, ready for me to enter any other employee information. And that's for, if I was repeating these steps and adding multiple employees. Again, I've not entered the bank details. It's just a reminder that I will need to do so. So I'll click OK to that. And you'll also see I get this message. So it's because I've got a factor pay element, which is based on salary, the overtime element here. So this pay element actually needs the contracted hours entered for the employee. So I'll click OK and I'll add that into the record. See, it's cleared down that form. So I'm OK just to go ahead and click Close. And now at the bottom there, I can see my brand new employee, employee number 11. They're ready to go. Now, one last thing I need to do. So for anything further I need to add to them or just to view this employee's record, I'll double click. Again, that'll just open the employee record as normal. But in this case, I do need to enter the contracted hours. So I'm going to go to the Employment tab. And at the bottom of here, I've got salary. I can see I've got this gross salary which I'd entered in here, but I also need to say how many hours they work basically. So this employee is going to be working 40 hours per week. So I'll enter that and click Save, and then save the record. So that's the employee record all set up now, and it is ready to use when I go ahead and process payroll. Now, something to note, I did mention that payroll works out the monthly salary automatically based on the information I entered. But if for the first period that they've not worked the whole month, let's say they started halfway through, just bear in mind you may need to do some adjustments to their pay for the days that they've actually worked. But that was adding a new starter with the starter form using the quick employee option. Remember, you also have the employee wizard too, and that's going to kind of break that down a little bit more. So you will be entering more or less the same information, but on a step-by-step basis instead. Now, in terms of notifying HMRC about this new starter, that is done automatically when you send the first FPS for the employee. The information sent across includes things like the employee's start date, their address, starter declaration, and student loan indicator too. So you just need to send your FPS as normal. That's actually how HMRC are informed of the new starter, which I will show shortly. But for now, we will go ahead and process the pay run and get my employees' payments entered. So camera back off and back to payroll. So first of all, I'm just going to highlight everybody. And from my payroll tasks, I'll just check my process date. I have already set this to the 30th of November, which is my next pay date, as it's a monthly payroll. And next, I'm just going to go ahead to enter payments. Everyone else is the same this period, but I do just want to check on my new starter. I believe there is an adjustment that I need to make to them. So I'll skip through this and just get to employee number 11. There we go. So they are getting their kind of normal salary for November, and you can see enter payments has calculated that as £2,083.33. But some of you may have noticed their start date was actually Monday the 28th of October. Now, this was actually past the cut-off date for October's pay for my company, so they are getting paid for those kind of few days on top of this month's pay. And I've worked out that they're owed £396.80 for those extra days in October. So I'm actually just going to enter that using the basic pay element that I added onto this employee, and that'll just keep it nice and separate on their payslip too. So hopefully we'll avoid any confusion there. I'll enter that, click save, and that is their pay done. So now that the payments are sorted, this is when you would just kind of move along with your pay run as normal. So pension assessment next, pre-update reports, and if you upload the pay slips, that's when you would do that too. But for the sake of today's webinar, I am going to skip ahead and I'm just going to update the records. And I would always advise taking a pre-update backup at this point too, just to make sure you do have a point to get back to if you need to kind of come back and change anything. But I'm going to click next and next, check everyone here, and click finish. I can see all 11 monthly employees have now been updated, with the last updated date of my process date, which is the 30th of November. Next thing would be nominal link if that's something that you use, but other than that, it will just be a case of then submitting the full payment submission to send over that starter information. So before we go back to the slides, let's go ahead and do this. You can also find that option in the e-submissions tasks too, or if you are a process map user, you do have all of these steps on that too. But I'll click continue in the full payment submission, check over my company details there and click submit. And something I do want to point out, if we scroll down, I can see I've got my new starter and I've got their start date with me, 28th of October there. So that is part of the information that's going to be sent across to HMRC. I'll click submit. And just as a reminder, so that information, the information that's sent across obviously is a start date, their address, their starter declaration and their student loan indicator too. That is included automatically. So in terms of notifying HMRC of the new starter, again, all you need to do is submit the FPS. We can see last FPS date now, 30th of November. And if you would like more information about the full payment submission, I have linked an article at the bottom of this slide, just going over all of the FPS basics, including what information is included in the submission too. But that is how to send over the starter details to HMRC. So moving on from the FPS, I do want to take a look at some common questions around new starters. I've got 3 examples for you. And the first common question is, what if the leaving date on a P45 is in a previous tax year? So I did mention this nearer the beginning of the webinar, but let's say I had an employee who was joining me this October, but they left their previous employment in March. Now the new tax year actually begins in April, so they left their previous employment last tax year. If that's the case, the key thing here is that no previous pay or tax needs to be entered for the employee. Those figures aren't relevant for the current tax year. Now payroll does make sure that the previous pay and previous tax boxes are greyed out if the date that they've left their previous employment entered was in a previous tax year. So just make sure that you've checked the date on the P45. But if that date is from a previous tax year, i.e. not the current tax year, you don't need to enter any previous pay or tax, so it's not relevant for them. But I have linked more information from the gov.uk website about that. Second common question is, what if an employee doesn't have a P45 or a starter checklist? So there are times when you won't get this information from the employee, and if that is the case, when you're adding the new starter, you're just going to choose the P46 option like I did, but you'll choose the starting declaration as none. And what that's going to do is put them on a 0T tax code for the time being. Hopefully that'll prompt the employee to get one of those forms for you. But if not, you'll get a new tax code notice from HMRC at some point, which will give you the new tax code for the employee. And while we're here, let me just show you that in the programme again. So let's go to the employee option. I'm just going to click on Quick Employee. So it's just this top drop down here. So if they don't have a P45 or starter checklist, you're going to select a P46 there and the starting declaration as none. And a third common question that I'd like to go through is, what if I receive a P45 or starter checklist after the employee's first full payment submission? Now, the answer to this does depend on whether you've received a new tax code notice from HMRC. If you have, you can forget about the P45 or starter checklist and just go with that new tax code that HMRC have given you. But if you haven't, you are still able to use the starter form wizard in the employee's record, and you are still able to input the information from the P45 or starter checklist kind of after the fact. And again, let me just show you whereabouts this is. Let's use my new employee as the example. Open them up there. And at the top of the employee record, you've got this icon here for starter form. So if you haven't received a new tax code notice yet from HMRC, and you do still need to input the information from the P45 or starter checklist, you can come into here, select what you need to, and kind of work through this and input that information there. So you'd work through the wizard, kind of click next and finish, and that will update the employee's record as relevant. But they are kind of the most common questions around new starters. I did want to kind of include these just in case they do help any of you there. But that has brought us to the end of the main content for the new starters webinar, meaning it is time for the last section, which is our quiz. So this is just a short quiz, just 3 questions. It is optional, but we would love if you did take part. Just put this knowledge to the test. So how it works is I will launch a poll on your screens for each question. You'll select and submit your answer. And after about a minute or so, I'll close the poll and reveal the correct answer to you. So let me grab that first question and launch that for you. So question number 1 is, which of this information is not included on the P45? Is it the national insurance category, the previous pay and tax details, or the tax code? So which of this information is not included on the P45? And again, I'll leave that open for about a minute or so, and then we'll kind of discuss the answer afterwards. Looks like most of you have got that right now, but I'll wait a little bit longer. So is it the national insurance category, the previous pay and tax details, or the tax code? And I'll just close that poll down and share that with you. Great, so yep, most of you got that right. 86% of you said national insurance category. And yep, that information's not included on the P45. So well done to those of you who said that. Previous pay and tax details and tax code are included. Well done, so that was question 1. Let me also launch question 2. That should be coming up on your screen any moment. And question 2 is going to be, how do you give new employees starter information to HMRC? How do you give new employees starter information to HMRC? Is it by submitting the employer payment summary, or EPS? Is it sending the part 3 of the P45? Or is it submitting the full payment submission, or FPS? So how do you give new employee starter information to HMRC? Submitting the EPS, sending part 3 of the P45, or submitting the FPS? Great, and I will close that down and share the results. So 99% of you said submitting the FPS, which is absolutely correct. Yeah, that was one of the last sections there on the webinar, so it is just a case of sending that, and that's going to include all of the information that HMRC need for this new starter. And lastly, question number 3. Let me launch that poll for you. This is a true or false question. So true or false, if a new employee left the previous employment last tax year, I don't need to enter any previous pay or tax information when setting up the employee records. Is that true or false? So true or false, if a new employee left their previous employment last tax year, I don't need to enter any previous pay or tax information when setting up the employee records. This is something we just spoke about there, so hopefully most of you get that right there. Leave it open a little bit longer. Fab, and I will close that poll down. So that was the last question there. I'll share those results. So 97% of you have said true, 3% of you have said false, and it is true. So yes, if the employee left the previous employment last tax year or the tax year before, you don't need to enter any previous pay or tax information, as that's only relevant for the current tax year. So it's true. But that is the end of the quiz, so a massive thank you for taking part there, and well done to those of you who got those correct. Now there is still a few minutes left to download the handouts or kind of ask any last minute questions that you've got, and we will stay and make sure we try and get through all of those questions. But one last thing to touch on is the further support that we've got available to you all, starting with our one-to-one bespoke training options. So if you're new to payroll or new to Sage 50 payroll, this is going to be really great. We've got training bundles including admin automation, pensions module, holidays and statutory absence, and more. So if you do want more information on that, or you think you'll find it helpful, definitely give us an email at ukisageuniversity@sage.com for more information and, of course, a personalised quote for you as well. We've also got loads of upcoming webinars too, so we do run these throughout the whole year for Sage 50 payroll, Sage 50 accounts and things too. This month we've got processing levers, so Duncan will be presenting that tomorrow. We've also got a Sage HR showcase webinar going over the core HR module. Got 2 sessions coming up this month. Get your payroll done. So we've got kind of broke that down into 2 sessions. We've got processing payroll. We'll take a bit of a kind of deeper look at that process, and also getting your payroll done, the month-end tasks as well. Also a one on your guide to HMRC submissions. So this is going to be kind of going over each type of HMRC submission, what it is, what it sends, and kind of when to send it to. And our next HR Advisor Plus webinar too is going to be how to address performance issues in the first 2 years of employment. That is actually tomorrow morning, and I will be joined by some very special guests from HR Advisor Plus to go through that with you all. And you can click the buttons here on the handout if you do want to register for those, or of course go to sage.co.uk/webinars. We've also got a help centre, sage.co.uk/help, or it's also available from your homepage in Sage 50 Payroll. All of the help articles which I've linked on the slides are from here. It's a fantastic resource just to get access to all of these articles and a whole variety of topics. So just search for what you need, and you will kind of get search results come up with relevant articles and support and things like that. It also has links to get in touch with our experts if you do need any help or technical support too. And lastly, we've got Sage University too. So here you can set up a free account and you can access e-learning and bite-sized learning, as well as earning product certification too. So it is a great way to expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll or any other Sage products that you're wanting to know about too. But that has brought us to the end of the session today. So we will hang around for a few more minutes to try and get through those last questions that you've got. So if you do have any last minute questions, get those in the questions panel and we'll make sure to pick those up before we go. Remember, you can download the handout, which will have all of the slides from today, and do feel free to copy any of the Q&A if you'd like to keep any of those for future reference. If you found any of them particularly helpful, feel free to keep those. And last thing from me, there is going to be a short survey that you'll get as you exit the webinar. So if you do have just a minute to fill that out, or you've got any comments to leave us, we would really, really appreciate that. We read every single comment that you leave us. We do try to make these webinars the best that they can be. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind filling that out, that would be great. But for now, I can still see a couple of questions in that questions panel. So what I'll do, I'll go on mute for a few moments to answer those last questions with Duncan. And I'll be back in a few minutes to just say goodbye and end the webinar. So I'll be on mute for a moment and I won't be long. Hello everyone, that's just me back again. Thank you so much for all of those questions and for your time this afternoon. It looks like most of those have been answered. In fact, I think all of them have been answered now. So massive thank you to Duncan, who's been answering those throughout the session. But it is now time to say goodbye and end the webinar. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, you've learned something new, and we do hope to see you on some more webinars in the future. So from myself and from Duncan, it's goodbye for now.